Hello, sweetie pies. Today we are going to be learning about early Americans. We have been reviewing and studying everything about history. What is history? Historians, different kinds of sources, artifacts from the past, and many others, just to find out and to learn about what happened before us. Learning from the past, it's important. So let's start by learning from those who lived here before us in America. Native Americans were the very first Americans. They were here long before any other people. But the question is, how did they get here? Well, there are many theories. Some say that people came by foot. Some others say that by boat. Some others even say that people came out from the ground. Yes, that they pop up through a spring or they came walking from the center of the earth through and got out through a cave. Well, there's others that says that first Americans came on ships, but as spaceships. Yes, from space. Yes, outer space. Well, ET, extraterrestrials? Well, in Native American cultures, there are many legends of otherworldly visitors. So, why not? Ancient astronaut theorists believe that these mythic figures may have actually been extraterrestrials. And some even say that is the cause of why some of the ancient cultures just vanished, disappeared with no trace. Well, some suggest that ancient builders of the pyramids or the Nazca lines and others were following an extraterrestrial instruction manual. Perhaps the hand that crafted these sites weren't really of this world. Well, the truth is that first Americans weren't one group of people. They arrive at different times and likely by different methods. The easiest way to get here is by foot. The Bering Land Bridge has been the long standing theory because that's the clearest connection between Asia and North America, up in the Arctic. And it only appears when ice is locked up on land and sea levels drop. It's the only place where you could walk from one side to the other, from Alaska, North America, to Russia in Eurasia. The first people in the Americas arrived in North America across a frozen sea from Asia over 20,000 years ago. They followed these lines from across the Bering Land Bridge that was frozen by the time and crossed from Siberia to Alaska and all the way down to North America and South America. But where did they come from? Well, there are some theories also. We know for sure that the very first Americans were big hunters who carried spears of bone and stone. They came from Asia, but they weren't looking for a new place to live. They were just following the giant buffalo and some woolly mammoth that they tracked and killed those animals to survive. So we now know that they came from Asia. But imagine 40,000 years ago, the last great ice sheet still covers much of the north. All Canada is frozen. You're a hunter with your family, tracking animals for food and for hides to make warm clothing. You carry a stone tipped spear. On foot, you follow wild herds through the cold and flood. You cross the bridge of ice. On the other side, you find a new land. But you do not know that it is a new land. You only know that there are no human enemies to stop you. So you keep pushing south, following the herds. And all of a sudden, you find paradise. Many animals, elk, deer, bison, wild vegetables, wild fruits, and a forest with so many trees, and even squirrels and rabbits and many other animals you didn't even know about. Fish are so many that they leap from the strip right into your arms. As time goes by, other people find their way across the frozen land. Many years pass. The ice begins to melt. Now there is a wide strip of water where once there was a walkway of thick ice. Still, people find their way across the Bering Strait in boats of bark. So, during the Ice Age, which is a long period of extreme cold, the continents and the seas were frozen, creating bridges that connect land masses and reducing sea levels. These made possible the ways for North American migration. So, the first wave came from Siberia through the Bering Land Bridge onto North America, walking through the thick ice. The other wave came also from Eurasia to North America by boat through the coast. And you may be asking, why did they come here? Well, due to weather changes, the climate conditions worsened, producing droughts, which is a long period without rain. And without rain, the land dried up. So the plants died and there's nothing to eat. So animals moved looking for pasture to eat. And so did the tribes. Nomad people wandered behind the animal herds that they would hunt for food. Remember that nomads does not have a specific place where they live. They move around. They wander. They walk and walk where the food goes. Following the food, they will go. So, for many hundreds of years, people wandered into the great Northwest. They wandered in all directions across Canada and the United States. Native Americans are not actually native, so they were immigrants. Well, some scientists say that first people arrived in the United States over 40,000 years ago from Asia, crossing the frozen sea by land. Some say that 20,000 years ago. Well, it is safe to say that Native American culture is a really, really old. In 2013, scientists and archaeologists made a surprising discovery. They learned that at least one third of Native Americans probably descended from people from the Middle East or Europe rather than East Asia. That makes one out of three people. So that means that the drought may have made more people move to North America than we believed. Not only the people from Siberia and East Asia, especially from a place called Mongolia. Well, that's the place that people think, scientists believe, that people moved to North America. It has some sense. Okay, Mongolians have a slanted eyes and a skin darker, just like American tribes. But not all tribes look the same. They're different people. So that means that indeed they came in different times and by different ways. So there were more than one moving tribe through America. We still don't have all the answers, but the history of Native Americans is more complex than archaeologists originally believed. They're still finding the truth. So, what did happen? We know that nomads tribe followed the herd. The herds were following the food, which in North America was warmer and they had pasture. So they left the drought plains from Eurasia and moved to North America through a land bridge. They were followed by the tribes and they kept on following other animals. Once the large animals like the mammoth and the bisons were extincted, they kept moving and they kept following and hunting other animals. They went all the way down to South America, passing the Panama Land Bridge. So you may think, well, why do people say that they came to America and not all the way around? That people from America went to Europe? Well, scientists and archaeologists have found that early sites that much older than the ones they have found in America. So that means that people came from Africa and moved along Europe, Asia, including Australia, and then stretched out through the land bridge of the Bering Strait and moved down to North America, Central America, and finally reached South America. So, people lived in the American continents long before Christopher Columbus voyaged. You know, the European man that came and thought that he found Indian? Well, we were here even before Leif Erikson, the Viking, visited North America. Yes, Vikings came before Christopher Columbus voyaged to North America. They were living in Greenland, and Leif Erikson decided to visit the coast that was near, reaching North America. We don't know what happened, but we know that he was here. Archaeologists have found evidence that the first settlers came to North America at least 16,000 years ago. Some say as long as 40,000 years ago. We do know that at least three waves were visiting. 16,000 years ago, some came 20,000 years ago, and the older ones came as long as 40,000 years ago. All of them were nomads, and they wandered or walked in all directions, populating all the continent from the north to the south. They followed grazing animals that were moving due to drought across a land bridge that connected Alaska to Siberia during the Ice Age. This land bridge disappeared when the ice melted, so others traveled by boat. The area is now covered with water and is called the Bering Strait. So, this Early Americans adapted to their environment and all these different climates. So, in the forest of the Northwest, Native Americans built wooden homes and became skilled fishermen. In the Southwest and in the Southeast, they learned how to grow crops and cleared forest for farmland. In the plains, they relied on the buffalo for food and clothing. So, Native Americans lived in tribes. Each tribe spoke its own language, and they also had specific traditions and cultures. They had many different customs. Some were hunters and gatherers, some became skilled farmers and clever builders, some were engineers and weavers. As different as the many tribes were, they all made incredible art, pottery, baskets, and baskets. They loved games of skill and of bravery, and they created stories and poetry. Some even created writing and counting methods. And all of that is what you will be telling us through your historic maps. So let's see all this in a review.
Who really discovered America? They say it's this guy, but he wasn't even the first European. This guy was. But when they both got here, there were already people in America. So who were these first Americans? So if the first Americans weren't some Spanish conquistadors or Vikings plundering the world, who were they really? Well, it turns out they look much more like something like this, which many people today might call a caveman. But they weren't really cavemen. What you would call them is a hunter gatherer, which means they do exactly what their name suggests here, which means they hunt and they gather things to survive. And they didn't live over here in America at all. In fact, they lived originally in what you would call Eurasia. So the part where Europe and Asia connect, being one giant landmass, would be Eurasia. And they would come to America about 40,000 years ago. So, as a hunter and gatherer, what they would do is just be searching all the time for food. They would wander all over Eurasian area looking for food and shelter and all the things they needed to survive. And eventually, they get to a location right here. And as you can notice, getting across to America would be a little bit difficult. It would require either boats or what we call today the Bering Strait land bridge. So let's take a look at the Bering Strait. What we're talking about is the waterway between Asia and America. So a strait is just a small piece of water that are going through places. Here's another one here that is going between. Here's another one going between two pieces of land. These would be straits where a small piece of water can be passed through, separating two land masses. Now, this is the Bering Strait up here at the top between Alaska and Asia, and it was unpassable unless you had boats. So, like I said before, I'm going to put boats here. They would need boats or what we call the land bridge. Now, a land bridge is possible between the two if you are talking about a time period known as the Ice Age. So let's take a look at the Ice Age here. I'm going to write that one more time for you. Ice Age. During an Ice Age, the polar caps, so up here like in the North Pole, for example, they would grow. There would be more and more ice and snow, and they would continue to move further south than they normally are. And whenever you have ice built like that, you have lower ocean level. So the ocean level begins to drop, which means more and more land is the growing between two pieces of land. For example, whereas the Bering Strait used to be here, there now is covered in ice, and I could walk across. Or before, where I could take a boat across, I don't have to go across the ocean. I can just follow a boat along the ice, hunting. And eventually, as you can see, you would wind up in America. So let's bring our hunter gatherer back into the picture. Let's say he lives in Asia and he's wandering around hunting and gathering for most of his life. And eventually they get over to here, and now when they get here, they're no longer stopped by the Bering Strait. They can technically walk across, or later with canoes, other people can canoe across the ocean line, and they eventually are in America, and they would populate and go all the way down to the south. These people right here would be the first Americans. Today we call them Native Americans.